welcome everybody to another episode of General Discussion. Today we're going over Anowon the Ruin Thief. I figured a lot of people probably are picking up the Zendikar commander decks. There's a lot going on there. A lot of value, a lot of nice staples, a lot of cool cards too, but it's not going to beat decks that people have already spent a lot of time, upgrading cards and putting work into. So figured I'd put a guide out to talk about some good ways to take the deck, some good places to go with it. But before we get into all of that, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave comments, all of that. I really appreciate it. Really helps me grow the channel, really helps me keep making these videos to continue to help people upgrade their decks, because I think people like to upgrade their decks. It's one of the best parts of Commander, if we're being honest. So, let's get into Anowon. So first of all, Anowon is a legendary creature vampire rogue. Anowon previous iterations of Anowon were mostly vampire related. This one is more heavily rogue centric. In fact, you can almost ignore the vampire text on this card for most intents and purposes. Anowon says other rogues you control get +1/+1. So first off, rogue lord, which is actually powerful. Having lords as commanders is not something you see very often in Commander. There's some I can think of, but there's not a ton. And it's really powerful to be able to pump your team basically anytime you want. So that, from a starting point, is a pretty good place to be. Additionally, Anowon says, whenever one or more rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them. If the player mills at least one creature card this way, you draw a card. So, basically, if your opponents have creatures, which generally Commander decks do, although, some won't, but most Commander decks do have creatures in them, you can draw up to, if you're in a 4-player game, you got 3 opponents, you could draw 3 cards at combat by, milling players out, drawing cards. The damage from this commander is going to be a little less important. Like, it's weird that you're milling and doing damage, but the fact that damage with this commander converts directly to cards milled means almost certainly that you're going to end up milling them out more often than you're going to kill them with damage. So, the +1/+1 looks weird from the mill perspective, but because damage, converts directly into cards milled, it still fits pretty well there, I'd say. So let's look at the average distribution. So we got about 34 lands, 32 creatures. So about a third of your deck is lands, a third of your deck is creatures, and then the other third of your decks is, split between instant sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers. It doesn't look like they play very many planeswalkers. Same with enchantments, not very many of those. They do have a decent amount of artifacts. I'd assume a lot of that is mana, although I think a lot of artifacts play pretty well with this, and there's a few instants and sorceries, and this split looks pretty good to me. I wouldn't argue very much with this. I don't think any of it's particularly wrong. I would like to have probably 42 to 45 mana sources in this deck, but I want a few of them to be artifact based, and that's pretty consistent with this graph. So I think a lot of that fits pretty well. The creature number seems right to me. I like a lot of these, so I think that's pretty good. So first off, a card you're definitely going to want to play is Soaring Thought Thief. I think this one's great, also cheap. I think it's actually in the deck, so you should probably already have one. But you're also probably going to want a Thieves Guild Enforcer. This card's very good. And I think Enigma Thief is pretty good. Enigma Thief and Wind Robber I could take or leave. I do really like Zerasan. Zerasan is the type of card that really pays you off for playing a deck like this, and I would be very happy to always include a Zerasan in my Anowon the Ruin Thief deck. This card's very powerful. It's very easy to get a hit in when you have flying rogues like these, and it's going to mill, with this commander, it's going to mill them for 5 a lot of the times, which ends up fueling itself. Punishes the person who's not playing a lot of creatures, which is actually something you're interested in doing in this, because the opponents that are playing a lot of creatures, you get to draw cards off them, so punishing the people not playing creatures is generally good for you. Arcane Signet, I tell you to put this in your deck. Realistically, this should go in basically every commander deck. Windgrace was an example of one where it didn't go, and it makes sense when lands matter and you're playing cards like Rampant Growth or Nature's Lore, stuff like that to ramp at 2 mana via lands. So basically in every deck that's not doing that, I do generally want an Arcane Signet. This card's very powerful. In fact, it's actually one of the reasons to buy this deck is because it comes with an Arcane Signet, so that's great. Una's pretty good. Fits with the mill theme. Gives you a bunch of evasive flying tokens, so I would play Una. Una's good. These kinds of... Alright, so let's look at the high synergy cards. The cards they're saying are ones you should be playing. So, Sig River Cutthroat. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, you may draw a card. 2 mana 1/3 that says that. I like Sig. I'd play that. You're going to want a lot of card draw in decks like these. In Commander, it's very, very difficult to swarm the board by simply curving out. Like, if you just have a curve in your hand, you got 3 lands, like a 2-drop creature, a 3-drop creature, a 4-drop creature, maybe like a Signet or, Soul Ring even, something nice to kind of get you started, and then your commander. Unless your commander's, generating card advantage by themselves, just curving out isn't going to beat a lot of people in Commander. The life totals are too high. You're not going to be able to just, here's my nice curve out, attack, attack, attack. That works in Constructed, that works in many other formats, but in 4-player formats where people are starting at 40, that's not the way. And for a deck like this, you want high synergy cards that also draw you cards, which is a reason I like Anowon. It's a source of card advantage from your command zone, which is very, very powerful in Commander. It's one of the best things you can be doing, in my opinion. So I like that. Una's, Sig fits in good. I would play Sig. Una's Blackguard. Each other rogue you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So basically a Lord. And it says whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So card advantage out of a Lord. Very powerful card. Would always play this in this deck too. Also not a particularly expensive card. So, that's nice. Notorious Throng. If you prowl it out, you get to take an extra turn. I think, in general, in Commander, I like to stay away from extra turn cards because it tends to upset people. But in a deck like this, where it's a tribal rogue card, your rogue deck, rogue isn't necessarily the most powerful thing to be doing in Commander, but it's more like a fun thing. I think you can definitely play Notorious Throng, and I think people kind of understand, and you're going to want to cast it for its prowl cost, but it's really good when you do, and I would definitely play it. Same thing with Frog Tosser Banneret. A rogue that makes all your other rogues cost 1 less. Awesome. The haste is, good. It comes for free. It's a 1/1, which, as we're going to see, actually having low power rogues is going to be pretty good in this deck. So, there's a few reasons for it, but we'll get into it. A Stink Drinker Bandit. Whenever a rogue you control attacks and isn't blocked, it gets +2/+1 until end of turn. I don't hate the card. I'm not super excited about it. It does function like a Lord. In fact, it functions like a 2-mana Lord a lot of the times, but I don't think it's very strong. In general, wouldn't be very excited to play this card. It's not embarrassing to put in your deck. I could understand having it, and I think that would be fine, but it's not something I'm, excited about. So mostly this would wind up in my, outside, 100 to 110th card range, probably something in there. Invisible Stalker is great. A rogue that can't be blocked, I'm going to play all of those, and in fact, same thing with Triton's Throw-Shocker and Slitherblade. I just want... Rogues that can't be blocked are going to be very good in this deck. You want rogues dealing damage to your opponents, and it's super, super hard to keep boards clear in creature decks. There's not very many cards that let you do that. The ones that do it are very expensive, and it's hard to keep getting damage in. So the ones that can't be blocked, I think, are particularly very, very good. Ones that have flying or can't be blocked, I'm very excited in. I would definitely play. Thieving Skydiver is busted. Stealing Soul Ring is incredible in Commander. I would always play it. Notion Thief is another absolutely just very, very strong card. Would always play this one. Just being able to steal your opponent's draws is just super, super strong. I think this is a must-play in a Rogues deck. I think a lot of times people won't let you keep it in play, but it's definitely one I would have in there. In fact, it just comes with the precon. So, if you bought the deck, you have an Ocean Thief, and I would always leave it in. Even the most upgraded versions of the deck, I would have this. Moraine River Prowler. Again, a rogue that can't be blocked. That's fine. I would play it. It's 3 mana though instead of 1 or 2, so I'm less interested in it. It does let you cast it from your graveyard most of the time. So probably going to make the cut, but not one I'm like, crazy excited about. Just one I would play. Distant Melody is a great card. I would always play this in any of my blue tribal decks in Commander. Just lets you draw a lot of cards in the format, which is something you need to kind of keep the cards flowing, keep the damage pushing through. Keep the mill coming with Anowon. Even lets you just hit your land drop so you can keep casting Anowon, because Anowon's pretty powerful. They're going to want to keep him off the board, and when they kill him, you're going to want to cast him again, because your deck is kind of going to be built in a way where it just doesn't function without Anowon. So, making sure you hit your land drops, making sure you have land so you can cast them a second and a third time is going to be pretty important for this deck. And card draw like Distant Melody is going to be at a premium to help you do that. Sure-Footed Infiltrator, another unblockable rogue. Also lets you draw cards. Definitely would play this one. 4 mana for a 2/3 is not a great deal in Commander, but again, would play it. I wouldn't be sad to cut this either. I think it is a good card. It's one I would play, but again, not the kind of card that I think you absolutely must play. Probably going to be in my like 90 to 110 range, depending on the power level of the deck. I could see it missing the cut a lot of times if I'm going more powerful, and would probably play it in less expensive versions of the deck. Changeling Outcast, again, it says Shapeshifter, but it is a rogue for the all intents and purposes of this deck. Would always play it in this deck. It's a 1/1 unblockable. You're going to want to play it. It's basically just another copy of Slitherblade or Triton Shorestalker, and you're going to want to play it in these decks. It's great. Mindstone, good ramp, colorless ramp. Going to play it. It's one of the best 2-mana ramp spells in the format. There's kind of like a triumvirate of 2-mana ramp things. There's Arcane Signet, for 2-color deck, essentially. There's Arcane Signet. There is the, just your Signet, like for Anowon, a Dimir Signet. If it was a different color, that color Signet, whatever. The Talisman of your colors. So I think it's Talisman of Dominance for blue-black. I would play Mindstone. And for me, the fifth best one is Thought Vessel. I think Thought Vessel is very strong. I think it's better than almost every other colorless 2-mana ramp spell. There's certainly other ones you could play, but I would play Thought Vessel over most of them because of how good it is to just get extra cards in Commander. And I don't want to be playing. I actually think Thought Vessel is a much stronger card than Reliquary Tower. I think Reliquary Tower is very overrated, and Thought Vessel is very underrated. And it's because of an opportunity cost thing. In a deck like this, where you're looking to generate a lot of cards, I might play both. I think you could get away with it, especially a 2-color deck. But I do like Thought Vessel a lot. I would play it. Drown in the Loch is not great. I'm not going to say it's a great card in this deck. It does do a lot of things. It's a split card between Terminate or Counterspell. And in fact, a lot of decks are interested in Counterspell, so I do think it makes the cut. But kill spells in the format just... You need a couple, and I think Drown in the Loch is flexible enough to play it. I would probably always include it, but I'm not going to say it's great. In general, in Commander, kill spells aren't very good. You'd rather have sweepers, but having 1 or 2 can be good, and the fact that this is flexible can also be a counter spell to stop your opponent's game-winning play is great. I would play it. Ghostly Pilferer, I don't think is actually very good. I think the card's quite bad. It can be unblockable, and it does draw a card whenever your opponents cast their commander, which is good. I guess the whenever they cast their commander thing makes it good enough. I'd probably play it. Again, the fact that it looks like card advantage, right? It's like whenever it becomes untapped, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. And you can discard a card to make it unblocked. That's just not card advantage. It's like card filtering. You're discarding a card, and then next turn you're drawing a card. So it's like you're not even getting the good end of the deal. You're discarding a card, then waiting a full turn cycle before you draw a card. So you don't even get the information of well, hey, maybe I didn't think I needed this card, but now a full turn has gone by. My opponents have made plays, and now I need the card. I don't really like that aspect. The fact that it draws a card when your opponents cast their commander, though, makes it interesting. Probably going to be on, outside of my top 100, but again, in lower power level decks, if you just have the base version, you have a Ghostly Pilferer lying around, probably worth an upgrade there. Reconnaissance Mission is going to be very good. This is the type of card I love in these decks, especially when your commander is paying you off for playing, 1/1 can't be blocks, which are, I think very good in this kind of deck, and I want to play almost every single one I can find. And in that case, making those cards do more is really powerful, and this does more. It does a lot more. It makes them draw a card every time they attack, which is insane. It lets you start drawing a lot of cards. It's going to pair very well with your Thought Vessel and your Reliquary Towers. Would definitely play this. Nighthawk Scavenger is a card I would never put in these decks. Never. Almost never. I mean, if you just got it out of the box and like, okay, sure, I have a Nighthawk Scavenger lying around. Yeah, okay. I mean, you can fit something in, but you could say that about a lot of cards you could put in this deck. And for my intents and purposes, it just does not do enough in the game of Commander. It's just a big X3 lifelink that won't matter, will get swept away, isn't going to generate card advantage. It can mill your opponents for a lot with Anowon, which can be good, but a lot of times, like, it doesn't have a lot of toughness, so, like, your opponent's just going to have some flyers lying around in a lot of cases. They can block it. If it's ever too big of a problem, opponents can kill it. It's just, too expensive, does too little, doesn't generate enough advantage. In fact, I'd much rather have a Slither Blade or a Triton Shorestalker over it, and these cards are much cheaper, so there's not even, like, a huge reason to play it. In fact, I think Thieving Skydiver is significantly better. I'd play this every time over Nighthawk Scavenger, and it's also a cheaper card, so would rather play that. Night Veil Sprite surveils and is an evasive, 1-power rogue. I would play it. I again think this card is better than Scavenger. The Obelisk of Erd, I think you can play it. I'm not super interested in it. When you already have a Lord effect with Anowon, getting more Lord effects is less interesting. It's like I already have something that makes them big. This isn't even making it, like, crazy big. If I had, like, you could convince me to play Coat of Arms. Coat of Arms is a very absurd card. When you have a lot of a tribe, all of them get gigantic. You have, like, 15 rogues, and you got 15 of them, and it's just too much. This gives you 15 3/3s, which isn't even enough to kill the rest of the table in a lot of instances, especially if they have blockers, especially if the game's gone on long enough that you have 15 things in play. Just not enough for me. I probably wouldn't include it. Consuming Aberration, again, not that great. I mean, it is a mill engine, so I think you could play it, but a lot of the power for this card's mana cost comes from just its sizing with being gigantic, and it does get really big. Don't get me wrong, this gets huge, but just not that into it. Fairy Vandal, I think I would play. I'm much more interested in Night Veil Sprite. This at least, like, scries every turn, helps you smooth out your draws, helps you hit your lands, helps you find, your reconnaissance mission to start generating a ton of value. Fairy Vandal just kind of gets big. I think Night Veil Sprite's much better. I'd be more interested in this. I think you could also play this, but again, not super interested in it. I do like Whisper Steel Dagger. When you're milling people, getting to cast creatures from their graveyard can be pretty powerful. It's not great. Like, this card's not amazing, but it's a card I could see in lower power versions of Anowon. Equipment in Commander, I think, is actually pretty good. It's a way that lets you commit to the board, put more power on the board, upgrade the small creatures you have, especially the unblockable ones, while also not exposing you to sweepers, which is kind of the weakness to a lot of these cards. So I think having a few equipment in the deck can be good, and this one's a fine one. In the best versions of Anowon, this wouldn't make it, but there's a lot more powerful equipment you can be playing. But in the budgeter, the cheaper versions, I think it's fine. I would play Glasspool Mimic, Glasspool Shore in every single Anowon deck. I think this card is amazing. I would always have it. There's just no way you could ever convince me not to play it. I think this card's amazing. Sir Conrad's okay. I probably wouldn't play it. This is played in a lot of decks. I personally don't like it very much. I would not play it. I think it's fine, but nothing spectacular. I think it's just fine. Again, Black Bloom Rogue kind of goes in the same thing as Glasspool Mimic. You just want lands in Commander. Missing your land drops in Commander is an absolute death sentence. You're going to lose games where you miss land drops. It's possible to recover in Magic in games where you miss land drops to one player because they can have inconsistencies. In a 4-player game, you just aren't recovering when you miss land drops. Like, maybe someone else also misses their land drop, and they probably also won't recover, but the two people hitting their land drops are going to beat you. I mean, that's how this format works. You can't be missing lands, and additionally, when you flood, it's not great either. So having, land creature split cards in this format is amazing. I would play every single one I could get my hands on. In fact, I think Zendikar is amazing for this set or for this deck. I would play like almost every blue and black flip land, and not every single one. Like Draw Disruption, probably a little too bad. For those that don't know, it's a 1 and a blue counter target spell unless that opponent pays 1. I think that's a little too bad for Commander. I wouldn't play that one, but like Agadeem's Awakening, we can even go down to those now. Just to touch on them real quick. I'm sure they're here, although I guess they wouldn't be in lands or in sorceries, right? Yeah, like here. Seagate Restoration. I would 100% play this always. They don't have Agadeem's Awakening on here, which is why... Or I guess they do. I apologize. Yeah, Agadeem's Awakening, same thing. Would play this in every single Anowon deck. It is more expensive if you're trying to upgrade. If you're trying to... if it's more budget, maybe you don't need to play it. But, like, as you're upgrading, this is a card I would look at and one of the first things I would add because it's not a game-winning spell in Commander, but it's a very powerful spell. It's a big spell. It's something to do with a lot of mana, and it provides you a ton of value when you do cast it. And it's just a land on the other side, which is just so good. So I would always play that one. Let's keep looking at some of these cards. Rankle, good. Would definitely play that. Provides a lot of value. It can hit, it makes a lot of... Each opponent discard cards, does, some powerful things. Master Thief, another one I would love to play. It's very nice to be able to steal artifacts in Commander. Everyone has a Soul Ring. Everyone's got some good artifacts in their deck. Blue-black is particularly weak to artifacts, so Master Thief is a great one. It comes in the deck, but even like the most powerful versions of the deck would play this card. Sepulchre Primordial, fine. It is a card you can play. It's a fine card. It's powerful. It's not something I'm like actively looking for in the deck, but it's a powerful card. I would play it. It's something I'd probably phase out as I upgrade, but it comes in the deck and it's a good top end, so I think it's fine to have. Marsh Flitter. Marsh Flitter's fine. It's not that good. Probably wouldn't include it. It's actually one of the first cards I'd look to cut. Latchkey Fairy. Again, fine. It's like a 3-mana 3/1 that draws a card. That's a powerful card. It's not bad. It's never going to be bad, but it's also not great either. Just 3 mana for creatures in this deck isn't something I'm like really looking for unless it's particularly powerful. Like Rankle. Rankle gives you a ton of options. Can draw you cards. Can attack opponents' boards, make them sacrifice their big stuff. I think it's very good. Thada Adel continues the stealing artifacts theme we've mentioned with Master Thief and Thieving Skydiver. Would definitely play Thada Adel. Brazen Borrower, a card I would probably have one to 2 copies of. Like the flexibility, or not 2 copies. Apologies, Commander. It's a card I would consider. Just the flexibility to bounce anything, definitely would be interested in having. Inkfathom Infiltrator, 2/1 can't be blocked. Fine card. I'd play it. I like the can't be blocks. I think there are better options. You probably want maybe about 8 of these cheap unblockable things in an ideal deck, and maybe that just is like around that 8th best spot. I would play it. Whirler Rogue I really like. Gives other creatures unblockable, but also a rogue, also gives you other bodies. The fact that it can give multiple creatures unblockable I think is very powerful in Commander. Would definitely play this. Keeper of Keys is busted. This is one of the first things I would look to upgrade. It is a rogue. It makes your whole team unblockable and draws cards. I think this card is unbelievable in Anowon. Again, one of the first things I would add. Zulaport Cutthroat, fine. You don't really have very many sacrifice synergies in this deck. It's not a bad card, but it's not one I'm like super interested in, so I don't know. Probably I could see it. I think it's fine in the deck, but it's not one I'm like interested in going out of my way to add. Just, if you have one lying around, you want to put it in, sure, but not one I think is particularly good in this deck. Blighted Agent, another unblockable thing. Again, I do think this is better than Inkfathom Infiltrator. The Infect can be kind of good in some scenarios. It does more damage to players in that scenario, and when you make it a 2/2 unblockable, it can kill people kind of fast with Anowon. And it doesn't I don't know that the mill thing works with it. I'm not actually sure how that interaction works, but I still think it's going to be slightly better than the other one, so I would play it. Ink Fathom Witch I do like. It's kind of like a 2-mana 1/1 unblockable, but it has another mode that makes all your unblocked creatures gigantic, so I would play that. Trinum Nemesis looks like it would be good, but I don't think it's very good. In fact, I'm much more interested in Looter Core. Looter Core lets you help sift through your deck. It's essentially unblockable. Shadow almost says unblockable in Commander. There's some weird cases where maybe an opponent could block it, but for the most part, it's unblockable. I would play it. I do like Glint-Sleeve Siphoner. I think you could play in cheaper versions of the deck. It's going to be a little hard to enable the energy, but if you get one attack in and then get to draw a card with it, it's going to be better than all the other unblockable ones. So I do like it, but Menace isn't unblockable. It is worse in that case, so I don't know. I'd probably play it over an Ink Fathom Infiltrator. I think it's probably slightly better than this card, but not significantly so. I don't know. Probably on that outside cusp of cards I'm looking at. Not super excited to have it. Ogre Slumlord I would not play. I don't think it's very good. Agent of Treachery, I think it is good. I would play this. Not crazy about it, but I would play it. Night Howler, I actually think Night Howler's okay. It comes with the deck. I don't think it's great, but in like my most upgraded versions, I would not play it in. But in cheaper versions, it can be a beating. Bestow actually works the way you want it to in this format, where you put it on your guy. That guy gets gigantic. They kill the guy. Now I just have another gigantic thing, and I don't like gigantic creatures in Commander in general. If you're building a lot of gigantic creatures, they're good, but just like having one really big creature is not generally very good in Commander. But the fact that this deck has unblockable creatures and it's easy to make it a gigantic unblockable creature, I think it's pretty good. This can lead to some one-shots, where you just, all right, I need to take opponent out. I got a 1/1 unblockable, put a Night Howler on it, they're done. I can get behind a Night Howler. Adaptive Automaton, not going to play this. Again, I said once you already have the Lord in your command zone, you don't typically want more unless they're like very powerful Lord effects, and this one's not, so I wouldn't play it. Earwig Squad, I just simply would not play. I do not think it's good in Commander. It's fine, in more budget versions of the deck. If you want to look through libraries, I guess you can play it, but I would never include this in any of my rogue decks. Fallen Shinobi is not a rogue, but it does very powerful things. And you're playing a bunch of unblockable creatures anyway, so it gets pretty powerful. I would play this. I do like this card. Duskmantle Guildmage, Mills opponents. It's fine. Probably wouldn't play it. Again, you can play more budget versions, but in general, I wouldn't play it. Metallic Mimic, it's kind of along the Adaptive Automaton things. Just not super interested in it. Scourge of Fleets. This one's one you can play. It does come with the deck. It can bounce a bunch of stuff, but again, there's just better ways to be spending your mana in Commander. It's not a particularly powerful card. It's fine in more budget versions. Again, fine to play, but not something I'm super interested in. Sakashima the Imposter, would definitely play this. I do like Sakashima quite a bit. Would definitely play it. Death Cult Rogue, I would almost never play. I don't think it's very good. It's just too expensive for the unblockable thing. You want your really cheap creatures to be unblockable, like your 1s and 2s. When you start getting to 3, I'm a lot less interested in them. Probably would not play this one. Shadow Stinger is fine if you're going like pretty high on the mill stuff. It does become unblockable. You are going to have rogues lying around generally, so it's not terrible, but it's also not one I'm like particularly interested in. Again, I think it's kind of on the outside looking in terms of rogues, although maybe it's fine. Ink Eyes, I think, is good. You can play Ink Eyes. I'm not crazy about it, though. I could definitely leave it. Scarab God is one I would definitely play. I think Scarab God is very good. It's the type of thing that gives you the late game punch that you're looking for. It doesn't really synergize with the deck particularly well. Unfortunately, when it brings stuff back from the graveyard, it brings it back as a zombie and not a rogue anymore, which is annoying, but still a good card. Would probably play it. It's just a very powerful card. Tetsugo Umezawa. I love this card in this deck. I would definitely play it. I think Tetsugo Umezawa is a snap include. Love this one. Not even expensive, so definitely including that here. Um, Daring Thief I think is good. It's not one I'm like super interested in, but I could see it. Deep Channel Mentor I think is too expensive. I probably would not play this one. It is a powerful effect. It is something I'm interested in, but I think there's better ways in general to account for that, and I don't think 6-mana 2/2 is doing quite enough. Probably wouldn't play it. Bruvac is, not a rogue, just a random human, but super, super powerful with what Anowon is doing. So I would include this. It's a very expensive card and hard to find, so you probably don't have it. But like if you had a Bruvac lying around, I would be happy to put it in my Anowon deck. I do like Thassa. I talked about I don't like the 3-drops being unblockable, but this can make multiple creatures unblockable, and this is a much better version of this effect that I was talking about. I'd much rather have a Thassa than like a Deep Channel Mentor. Cheap ways to make multiple things unblockable is very good. And this is also indestructible, so it gets around stuff. It provides not card advantage, but scrying every turn, over time kind of is card advantage. I like this one quite a bit. Nightshade Stinger, you can play it. Fine, another one unblockable. Like I said, you probably want about 8 of those effects. The one drop ones are almost always gonna be better than the 2-drop ones, so this one's probably gonna make it. But I would play a Tetsuko before this because it gives more things unblockable. But fine, I'd probably play it. Zulaport Duelist, I would almost never play. I do not think this should make your deck. Vampire Cutthroat, again, one of the 1/1 unblockable. Probably better than Nightshade Stinger. I'm more interested in this one, but the ones that just say straight up can't be blocked are definitely better than ones with Skulk or Flying, because these can be blocked. So not over the moon about them, but they're fine includes in the deck. I do like Fairy Macabre a lot. Having some graveyard interaction is pretty good. I would play it. I don't really like Thassa's Oracle in this deck. If you're trying to go really combo-y and you want to put some Demonic Consultations and Thassa's Oracles in, that's fine. That's a fine way to go about it, but not one. But if you're trying to go that direction, I just wouldn't play Anowon. So not interested in it from that perspective. And if you're not doing that, you're not drawing enough cards where you're gonna consistently be able to use this to win the game. And if that's the case, it's just like a 2-mana 1/3 scry some amount, and that's just not good enough in my opinion. So probably wouldn't play it. Definitely wouldn't play a Death Touch 2-drop. I think that's too bad. I might play Nimana Sky Dancer if I was very budget, but mostly wouldn't play. I do like Counterspell. I'm going to put Cyclonic Rift in every single blue deck I play. Probably Factor Fiction in almost every single blue deck I play as well. Just very, very good card draw for the cost. Kind of same thing with Fierce Guardianship. 0-mana Counterspells are great. I love them in Commander. They let you, play to your board and then counter the giant, game-winning 9-mana sorcery your opponent plays. So I think a lot of people don't like this card, but it's very powerful. If I had them, I would play them in this deck. I do like Aetherize. I'm not super high on it. I think you can play it in Rogues. It can save some of your creatures from some stuff. But not all that high in it. I would not play Soul Manipulation. It does look like card advantage / disruption, but it's not countering the game-winning spells oftentimes. The only one I can think of really is Craterhoof, and if this hits a Craterhoof, that's great. That would be very powerful, but I don't really want to be paying 3 mana for this effect, and there's just better ways to go about it. Again, Silumgar's Command a little too expensive for what it's doing. In my opinion, wouldn't play it. Also wouldn't play Murder. Reality Shift is fine. You can play it in more budget versions, but probably wouldn't play it. Deadly Rollick, I would always play in a deck like this. Like I said, with Drown in the Loch, you probably only want 1, 2, maybe 3 kill spells in a deck like this, and Deadly Rollick's free. It's the best of them, so I would play this one almost always. Swan Song, great card. Would almost always play it in a deck like this. Like I said, with Fierce Guardianship, it's really nice to be able to spend a bunch of mana on your turn and then hold up a counterspell for their game-winning spell. And these are going to counter most of them. They're going to counter your Expropriates. They're going to counter your Armageddons. They're going to counter your Insurrections. Just, any giant game-winning spell they're going to be able to counter, and they'll be good enough. So I like those. Brainstorm, if you have 10 fetches in the deck, if, fully upgraded version of Anowon, I would play Brainstorm. If you do not have at least 10 fetch lands, you need 10 fetch lands to play this card. If you do not have 10, I'm not playing it. If you have 9, okay, yeah, I mean, you're close enough, you can get away. But if you have 3 fetch lands in the deck, you got 2 an Evolving Wilds, a Terramorphic Expanse, and a Fabled Passage, get this out of your deck. Don't play it. Counter Squall, probably not playing it. It's just worse than Counter Spell for the most part. fine. Someone losing 2 life is just not that good. I think Negate's mostly better. Just because it doesn't have the extra black pip, so you can cast it off, a colorless source. Yeah, I don't know. Probably wouldn't play Counter Squall. Thieves' Fortune is fine. It's just like a good cantrip, for 1 mana. You get to look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, which is powerful. I mean, that's good. It's not insane or anything. It's just fine. Like, I don't know. Your best versions of the deck aren't going to play this. Your medium versions can play it. It's not something I would like, oh, my deck doesn't have a Thieves' Fortune, like I need to find one. No, like if you have one, you can put it in, but you definitely don't want to go out of your way to acquire a card like this. It's not that strong. It's fine, but not that strong. Spinal Embrace is pretty good. Stealing Stuff is good. I think it's fine. I would play it. Again, it's like just a removal spell that does a little bit extra. A little too expensive for that. Mostly wouldn't play it. It's a cool card. If you like it, you can feel free to put it in your deck. But again, I probably wouldn't play it. Didn't Say Please, definitely not playing. Mystical Tutor, I could see playing. You need like a reason though. You need a reason to play this, and I'm not seeing one from any of these. Although getting Cyclonic Rift could be a reason. If you had a Rift, I would play it. Getting like Fierce Guardianship is really just not good enough either. You want to get something that's just like kind of busted with this, like something that's super, super powerful. And none of these instants really do it for me. Oh, here's the Drawry Disruption I was talking about earlier. Don't put this in your deck. It's not good enough. Hagrimoling I would play, though. Hagrimoling I think is excellent. Force Will I would definitely play. $90 card. You may or may not have access to it. My best versions of Anowon would certainly have a Force of Will in it. Yeah, so in terms of cards to get with like a Mystical Tutor, like a Knowledge Exploitation, I think this card is pretty good. I would play it. 4 mana, tutor for opponent's like best card, so you can get to cast their 9 mana thing. Pretty good. I would play Knowledge Exploitation. Think it's good enough. Would definitely play it. I'm trying to find stuff like an Agadeem's Awakening. That's actually a pretty good thing to Mystical Tutor up. Might play it. Might have a Mystical Tutor in my deck if I had an Agadeem's Awakening in there. Kindred Dominance is a great one, or like Command the Dreadhorde or Rise of the Dark Realms. These are the kind of cards you want to be Mystical Tutoring for. Just really powerful game-winning effects. This is what I want. And if you don't have cards like these in your deck, I just would never play Mystical Tutor. If you do, I would be happy to play them. And also, let's say, like, on the Mystical Tutor thing, if I did have a Rise of the Dark Realms, and it's like a really powerful effect that I don't want my curve to be super high. I'm playing a lot of 1/1 unblockable guys that, just make it hard for you to get up to 9 mana because, instead of that 1/1 being mana ramp or more lands or ways to slow the game down, it's just a 1/1. So it's not really contributing to Rise of the Dark Realms very well. But Rise is just so powerful that like you kind of just want one copy in a lot of your commander decks, and just being able to find it multiple ways is super strong. So like, having a Mystical Tutor is great. Scheming Symmetry in a deck like Anowon is oftentimes going to kind of be the same thing. Mystical Tutor is kind of expensive, so I wouldn't be shocked if you played Scheming Symmetry in this deck. In fact, I think Scheming Symmetry is pretty good. I would probably play it. And another card like a Demonic Tutor. I would love, if I have a Rise of the Dark Realms, I'd love to get it with Demonic Tutor. Same thing with like a Kindred Dominance. Kindred Dominance is great, for the record. Would always play that. Just destroy all non-rogues. Insane in Commander. It's like a 7 mana play wind. Love it. It's one of the biggest payoffs to playing tribal cards in the format, in my opinion. In fact, this deck has both of the best Kindred cards in my opinion, because this one is busted. Here we go. Kindred Discovery. This is like a $20 or $33 card now. Jesus. This is a card I would tutor for, although obviously you can't get it with Mystical Tutor, but like Scheming Symmetry, Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, any tutor in your deck that can find this card, I want to get it, because this is probably the best card in your entire deck. This is the huge payoff for paying all the 1-drop guys. It's the first card I would buy if I was putting an Anowon deck together and I didn't have a lot of these cards I'm talking about. It would be Kindred Discovery. This card is busted. It's a card I just absolutely would always want. So still, I guess we never finished up on these, but a lot of these are fine. They're just kind of interaction. I don't think I would play Dark Ritual. I don't like Jwari. I want a few counter spells, maybe 4 or 5, but not a ton. A Downfall, again, like I'm thinking 2 or 3 point removal spells at most. And Downfall is probably going to be too expensive. It probably wouldn't make the cut, but it's fine. I do like Narset's Reversal, powerful card. It could be in one of your counterspell slots if you wanted to go that route. You also don't need to play it. It's just a good card. It's not like super powerful. I would always... In fact, I probably think you have to play a Feed the Swarm in these decks nowadays. So, in fact, I think you can just almost never really justify playing a Downfall. Just because it's so important for a blue and black deck to have enchantment interaction. You just aren't going to get it. And this is like the only one. So, this is a card I would kind of always play in these decks. Would definitely include it. Like I said, I really like Scheming Symmetry. I don't really like Maddening Cacophony. I think it's fine. I think you can play it, but the fact that it mills each opponent makes it good enough, but it's not what I'm like super interested in. Stolen Identity, I think, is insane. This is a very good card. It comes with it. I would have it even in my like upgraded versions. When you have a lot of unblockable guys, it just like reads basically every time your unblockable guy attacks, you create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature, which is insane because it doesn't have to be yours. If it had to be your creatures, I would not be super high on it. The fact that you can copy someone else's Avenger of Zendikar or someone else's Soul Ring and you get to keep doing that is super, super strong. I think this is one of the best cards in the deck. I do want like one sweeper, although I prefer Kindred Dominance, but if you didn't have a Kindred Dominance, I think having like a Damnation or a Toxic Deluge is fine. A Windfall I'm not actually very interested in. I think it's fine. I would not include it in my deck. You have card draw on your commander. I'd lean more towards trying to utilize that than card draw that also gives your opponent's card draw, which I do not like doing very much in a deck like this. Again, Whispering Madness is almost the same thing as Windfall. It does have the Cipher mechanic, which works very well in this archetype, but I'm not super interested in giving my opponents more cards. Although, it doesn't work with the mill theme because it's taking cards out of their deck. Still not all that interested in it. Ponder and Preordain are fine. You can play them. They're not bad. They're cheap. Low opportunity cost. My best versions of this deck would probably include them, but I don't think they're crazy or necessary. So I think Cloak and Dagger is not good enough in my opinion. I think it's close. I don't know. I'm not that interested in it. Binding of Thassa is a lot like Reconnaissance Mission. I would play this card. This is the kind of card draw you want in a deck like this. I think it's very good. Cloak and Dagger I don't think is good enough. It does look interesting in these decks, but I don't think it's good enough. I probably wouldn't play it. I would always play Sword of the Animist. I think Sword of the Animist is amazing in decks like these. In fact, I think this card should go in just almost any creature deck in Commander. This card is unbelievable in Commander. It's starting to get up there. You know, it's not as good as Soul Ring certainly, but in the like, you should be playing this card territory for me. Any deck that has creatures should be playing this, in my opinion. Mind Crank, fine, you can play it. It kind of is just more. It's more Anowon, I guess. It's more of what he does, but it's in a way where it's more of the way it's more of what he does in the way you want to do it, where like you don't want more pump effects for your creatures, you do want more mill effects that work the way Anowon works. So I think this one's actually good. I would play it. Vanquisher's Banner is great. I would play it. Whisper Silk Cloak is something I'm very interested in. I like unblockable stuff, so I would play Whisper Silk Cloak before I play Lightning Greaves or Cloak and Dagger, which I think would shock some people. But I think this is a much better effect, much better of that kind of effect in this deck. So I would be happy to play a Whisper Silk Cloak. Again, Coat of Arms is pretty expensive. It's like a $10 card, but I would always play it in these decks. I think it's insane. And this is like right up there with Kindred Dominance and Kindred Discovery for me. It's just one of the biggest payoffs of playing tribal decks in Commander, and I would love to play it. These artifacts I don't think are very good. I would play Herald Swarm. I do think this one's good. Swiftfoot Boots, Mask of Memory, Icon of Industry, I can all take or leave. Wayfarer's Bauble's good, though. I would play this one. Door of Destinies, I think, is actually good. It's kind of like another Coat of Arms. I would play this one. Sword of Body and Mind and Sword of Feast and Famine. I only want, 3 to 5 equipment in a deck like this. I do think equipment is good. You just don't want too many. And I think these are two of the best ones you can possibly have. Sword of Body and Mind mills them further. It's protection from two of the best colors in the game. They're in Commander, so very, very strong. And Feast and Famine, the same thing. Protection from green is awesome in Commander. Because there's not a lot of removal spells, the protection from black, protection from white, protection from red, a lot less valuable in Commander, but there's a lot of green creatures sitting on the board in this format, and so having unblockable from them is very powerful. It's a reason to play these cards specifically, and they both have awesome effects for Anowon specifically. Milling them is very good. Untapping your lands to cast more things is very good, so I like both of these. I would play them. Obviously, Feast and Famine specifically is a very expensive card, but Body and Mind's not super expensive, especially with the reprint. It's one I would look to pick up and play in these decks. I like it quite a bit. Bitter Blossom is great. I would play it. It's an expensive card. If you don't have a Bitter Blossom, it's not the end of the world. It's just one I would definitely play. Military Intelligence, I would not play. I would actually cut it. I know I said I liked, Biden of Thassa, Reconnaissance Mission, Kindred Discovery, those kind of cards. This is just not as good as those cards. It's a fine budget version, but I am not super interested in it. Ballistic Study's broken in Commander. This is like one of those you should always play it in blue decks, honestly. But it's also such an annoying card that I've actually started leaving it out of blue decks. If I was trying to win, this is the best possible version I can make of this deck, almost every blue deck I have would include a Ballistic Study because it's so heinous when you play it early. It's too much for opponents, so from that perspective, I would include it, but it's kind of a card I hate, actually. It's just really miserable to play with because you keep asking, do you want to pay one? Do you want to pay one? If that's your jam, go ahead and play it. I don't have an issue with people playing it, but I don't like it, so I typically tend to leave it out. But again, the best versions would always include it. It's just super powerful. You should include it. Animate Dead, fine. Not something I'm super interested in. Sphinx's Tutelage I do like. It works really well with Anowon and Teferi's Tutelage. A lot of pretty much the same thing. I would play both of these in the deck. I think they're actually pretty good. They're engines that will help you kill the opponent, so I'd be happy to play either. Teferi's Ageless Insight, I think it's fine. I'm not crazy interested in it, but I think it's fine. I would play it. My best versions of the deck would not include a card like this, though. I think it's kind of win more. I'm much more interested in a Coastal Piracy effect or Kindred Discovery. Kindred Discovery is going to make the cut over Teferi's Ageless Insight for me, every time. And, this one's this is a much more budget-friendly option than this one, but this just really isn't the type of deck for this kind of effect. You're much better playing these when they deal damage effects things in this kind of deck. And, I would play Coastal Piracy over this even. They're, kind of similar costs. They're not exactly the same. This is a little more expensive, but, Biden of Thassa is a pretty cheap card. And it's just a better version of that effect, in my opinion. Mr. Remore, you probably would play. Memory Erosion, very good. I would play it. I think you can play Propaganda. I'm not super high in it. It's just a good card in Commander, though, so it's fine to put in the deck, but I don't think it works particularly well with Anowon specifically, so it's not one I'm I need a Propaganda for the deck. It's just a fine card you can put in if you want to, but my best versions of the deck probably aren't playing this. Same thing with Phyrexian Arena. There's just better ways to draw cards. I'd much rather have a Coastal Piracy than a Phyrexian Arena. Much more interested in this kind of effect. All that said, you're not going to go... You can never be that wrong and put a Phyrexian Arena in a Commander deck. It's always going to be good. I would just not play Planeswalkers in this deck. Ashiok is very powerful. It is the type of card you can play. Maybe you should play, but... I don't know. Ashiok... The return on these cards just isn't that good to me. These are both good. They're both cards that you can certainly justify putting in your deck, and they're both kind of budget. So from that perspective, totally fine to play. They're just going to get killed really often. They're not going to stick around, and you're not going to have that many ways to recur them. So, not super interested in them, I guess. But, yeah, I don't know, fine. You can put them in the deck. No issue with them. Just, I don't know. My best versions probably wouldn't include either. Okay, so colorless lands in decks like these. You can't play very many colorless lands. You're going to have a lot of 1-pip blue spells. You need your lands to tap for blue. Or black. You have, cheap black spells. But you have a lot of 1/1s that... Those cards need to come down early. And colorless lands don't do that. So these cards come at a premium. You can afford to play a couple. Maybe 1 or 2. But you can't have very many. And for me, the best one in a deck like this is Rogue's Passage. I would play Rogue's Passage before any... Well... Alright, I lied. Ancient Tomb is the actual best one. I would play Ancient Tomb before any of them. But after that, then it's Rogue's Passage. Then maybe Reliquary Tower, although I think I would probably play Scavenger Grounds first. The rest of these lands, they're all good. If you have them, you should put them in your deck. If you don't have them, don't feel like you need to play them. But I would play any of these lands if I had them. Best ones probably like Urborg, especially if you have a Cabal Coffers. If you don't need to play it. Lockthwain I think is probably the next best. Then I actually like Shizo quite a bit. Then probably like Mystic Sanctuary if you have fetches. If you don't have fetches, I probably wouldn't even play Mystic Sanctuary. Yeah, that's probably that rating. The Cygnus, we mentioned them. I want about 5 mana artifacts. Like I said, Thought Vessel, like my top 5 is like, so I'll just order these quickly so people know. The best one here is actually Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt is better than Soul Ring. The second best one is Soul Ring. Right after Mana Crypt, they're almost the same card, honestly. Mana Crypt's just slightly better. Dimir Signet, Talisman of Dominance come in at second best. Then Thought Vessel and Mind Stone. And then Prismatic Lens after that, I think. The 3 mana ones I just mostly would not play. Not in a deck like this. I'm not that interested in them. I do think Chromox is good. I would probably play Chromox, but not super interested in it. And then these lands, you're going to play a lot of duels. In this deck specifically, untapped duels are very good. So like Morphic Pools, Clearwater Pathway, Command Tower, Watery Grave, Underground River, Polluted Delta, Unclaimed Territory. Those cards. I guess Choked Estuary, Cavern of Souls, even Darkslake Shores are going to be much, much, much better than cards that don't tap for blue or black on turn 1. And those are cards like Darkwater Catacombs. Doesn't come into play tapped, but doesn't tap for mana on turn 1 either. Jwari Refuge comes into play tapped. Dismal Backwater. I want to keep every tap land I can out of the deck. I do not want to play them. They need to have a very, very good effect. Dimir Aqueducts is probably like right on the edge of like, okay, maybe this effect is good enough. I'd probably play it. But a lot of these, like Scry 1 is not good enough in my opinion. I just wouldn't play this card. I'd rather just have a basic island or a basic swamp than Temple of Deceit. I'd almost never play Temple of Deceit or Jwar Isle Refuge or Dismal Backwater or Dimir Guildgate. I'd almost play none of those. I don't even like Sunken Ruins or Darkwater Catacombs. They just don't cast your things on 1. I think it's very important in a deck like this to do that. I would play like a Tainted Isle or a Drowned Catacombs. I think those are fine, but not like amazing. Like they're, if you don't have a Tainted Isle, I'm not going to go out of my way to include one in this deck, but you do need some amount of blue-black duels, and the ones that come into play untapped are just the best by far. So those are the ones I would play. All these fetches are going to be good, but honestly, like, I think you should do yourself a favor. Like, you want some duels, and you want them to be untapped. Like, Clearwater Pathway is great. Morphic Pool is great. Watery Grave is great. Command Tower is great. Those ones are all great. But before I started including, I would have to have, like, almost none of these other ones I listed before I included Dismal Backwater or Jwar Isle Refuge or Temple of Deceit or Submerged Boneyard. I'd have to have, like, less than 5 blue-black duels in my deck before I start putting them in. And for the most part, I'd be happy to just play, like, Fabled Passage, some of the cheaper blue and black lands, and a bunch of islands and swamps. And I think that's going to be better a lot of times than these. So that's where we're at on Anowon. Thanks everybody for listening. I really appreciate it. Remember, if you have any comments on this video, any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them. Happy to discuss anything. If you want to suggest the next commander for the series, hop in the comments. And I will, I'll put that next on the list. We can do that as the next commander that gets discussed here. So let me know. And with that, talk to you next time.
I'm joined by Kyle Balgames. Welcome, Kyle.
How are you?
Raja Suleiman with Orzhov.
Max McVitie.
Congratulations to Brian DeMars. Zach Allen.
I wouldn't be here without these guys, though. So.
And the champion of Proto Counter-Attack, Arilax.